Are not his sisters with us? Which is clear evidence. It's very clear. St. Thomas Aquinas was quoted. I'm glad R.C. Sproul likes St. Thomas Aquinas. But I hope everybody realizes we're talking way past, we're talking second millennia here, 1,200 years after the events. No one's questioning that Marian dogma had developed at that point. Certainly not all the Marian dogmas Rome's developed since then, but certainly Marian dogma developed at that point. It was said that I didn't mention Luke 1:34. Actually, I think Mr. Matix was just busy writing or something, because as I mentioned, it is Mr. Matix who gives this unusual understanding of the words of Mary to the angel. And so you need to understand that whole final discussion that was presented to you was a way to try to convince you that Mary had taken a vow of perpetual virginity. Where do you find that in the text? You all know how women viewed children in Jewish culture, right? So she had taken a vow of perpetual virginity? That's what Luke 1:34 is telling us? No, the present tense is she recognizes the angel is talking about something that's going to happen now before the finishing of her betrothal period and her marriage to Joseph. How can this be, since I am not knowing a man? I am not yet married to Joseph. How can this be? You see, Rome forces us to read all sorts of foreign concepts into the text. And every time we see that being done tonight, folks, we're seeing sola ecclesia proven before our eyes. Thank you.
We will now have a 10-minute rebuttal from Mr. Matix.
I knew that Dr. White would sidestep my challenge to take that perfectly biblical and innocuous oath, and he did not disappoint me. He said many times in his statements just now that such and such was not a part of the debate tonight. Well, I could say the same thing about all the red herrings. You know what a red herring is? You're on the track of a criminal, and someone drags some smelly fish across their trail so that the bloodhounds all of a sudden are distracted and go off in a different direction. Look at all the red herrings. Listen to all the red herrings that we've heard about tonight. Papal primacy, sola ecclesia, the bodily assumption of Mary, whether Peter's mother-in-law poses some problem to the later development of celibate clergy. The Catholic Church never denied that Peter has a wife, not because it's an inference, because the Bible says so. He even quoted the passage where St. Paul says, "Do we not have a right to take a wife along with us?" That is why we believe that, not because it's some inference from the fact that we mentioned she has a mother-in-law. The propriety of asking Mary to pray for her, which she spent time reading that prayer again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the same old tactic that I am tired of enduring during these debates. It is not my purpose tonight, it is not my task tonight to defend the biblical propriety of Christians interceding for each other. The Bible clearly shows that happening. And the propriety of believing that when a Christian dies and goes to heaven, that he or she continues to exercise charity for their fellow believers on earth and prays for them. The Bible shows beings in heaven praying for those on earth. In Revelation chapter 5, verse 8, and Revelation 8:13. That is not the purpose of the debate tonight, ladies and gentlemen. The purpose of the debate is a simple one. Does the Bible clearly teach that Mary had sexual relations with Joseph and that she had children? Are there people named in the Bible called the children of Mary? And because Mr. White cannot bring out Bible verses that say that, he has to engage in this song and dance and these distracting, evasive actions and to bring up all these other things that he thinks are an embarrassment to the Catholic faith when they're not at all. I mentioned the seed in Genesis 3:15. He says, where, Jerry? Is that just your own private opinion? No. I quoted St. Paul in Galatians 3:16, who makes a doctrinal point of the fact that the seed of the woman was a singular, Christ, and not a plural, Galatians 3:16. I quoted Isaiah 7:14. He says, where does that show the perpetual virginity of Mary? That wasn't my point, Dr. White. Please listen to what I'm saying and not what you would like me to be saying or what you think I'm saying. What I said was that Isaiah 7:14 teaches that Mary remains a virgin not only in the act of conceiving, but in the act of giving birth. Of course, it says nothing, and no Catholic has ever claimed that it says anything about her perpetual virginity. But Dr. White denies the fact that Mary remained a virgin in the act of giving birth, even though the Scriptures teach that, and every single recipient of the sacred Scriptures in the New Testament era, every church father teaches that Mary remained a virgin in the act of giving birth. It was not a natural birth, Dr. White. It was a supernatural event we call the Incarnation. Yes, certain things happen to women when they're not giving birth to the Son of God, certainly. But this was special, Dr. White. This was unique. And as a result, something special happened. Women, Dr. White, don't normally conceive without a human father. You do grant that. So what normally happens in conception and birth is not relevant here, Dr. White. We're talking about a miracle which the Bible predicts. Now, I'll be happy to not sidestep his challenge and to show you that his biblical arguments are, in fact, insufficient to prove his point. The first one he makes, going through the order in which the verses occur in the New Testament, is Matthew chapter 1, verse 18. He made much of the fact that before they came together, she was found to be with child. Aha, he said, this coming together, the sunelthane, must refer to sexual relations. And what point would it be to say that she was found to be pregnant before they had sexual relations if they didn't have them afterwards? But even the normative Protestant lexicon, Bauer, Arndt, and Gingrich, and I'm happy, Dr. White, to spend time on grammar. I'm happy to talk about the Greek. I had the privilege of starting to study Greek at a prep school, Phillips Exeter Academy, one of the few prep schools that still teaches Greek at the high school level. I did a self-designed major in classical New Testament and patristic Greek at University of New Hampshire. I went on to study Greek at the master's level and at the doctorate level. And these Greek arguments have been shown to Greek scholars who far outstrip both my competence and Dr. White's, who have simply laughed at this. And I can give you a whole article by Father Ronald Taselli, who has shown these arguments about Heos who. This thing has been blasted to smithereens and even retired by Protestant apologists, and yet it's still being dredged up tonight. That Heos who, in contrast to Heos, the preposition Heos, must mean that something is true only until a certain point and not afterwards. But before we get to that, in verse 18 of Matthew 1, before they came together, even the normative Protestant lexicon Bauer, Arndt, and Gingrich says, quote, in the marriage contracts, in the papyri of this period, sunelthane, this very verse, means to marry. It does not have to have a reference to sexual relations. And so it's simply saying before they were married. There was a difficulty. There was a social awkwardness because she was clearly seen to be pregnant. This was a concern. There was a potential scandal here, which there wouldn't have been had they already been married, because not all people would have known necessarily if they were living a celibate life if she became pregnant within the, quote, socially acceptable context of marriage. He then moves on to Matthew chapter 1, verse 25, and says, it said that he had no relations with her until she gave birth, but that must mean, because it's Heos who, that he had relations with her afterwards.